Thank you so much. It's a great honor for me to be with you today, and I really appreciate hearing the feedback in terms of what was discussed at the conference. I was particularly struck by the discussion of nationalism. It's not just because I'm an LSE alumni, but I think that so often we fail to distinguish between different forms of nationalism in the discussion. At a basic level, love of one's own community, love of one's own country is legitimate. But that has to be an open-handed love, a love of the universal that is grounded in a love of the particular, not an exclusive, dominating sort of nationalism. And it's so important that we distinguish. In fact, our own history as Canadians is of two nations coming together to form a binational, bicultural state. And George Cartier, one of our founders, spoke about a common civic nationalism. The importance of building a shared civic nationalism together that isn't based on domination or exclusion. So the discussion so far has been fascinating. I want to bring greetings on behalf of our leader, Andrew Scheer. Andrew is committed very much to the belief that Canada needs to re-emphasize human rights as part of our foreign policy in general, and in the case of Sri Lanka in particular. I want to share a little bit about what our approach is to these issues, and also what I see as some of the next steps we need to take going forward. So in 2013, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper boycotted the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Sri Lanka to protest ongoing human rights abuses. He also walked out of the summit in 2011 when Sri Lankan President had been invited to speak, and he threatened to withdraw funding from the Commonwealth if they did not take a stronger stance on human rights in Sri Lanka. Very often in this House of Commons, we have debates on foreign policy which center on how tough we should be in these cases. Everybody from every party, I think, aspires to see a world in which human rights are better protected. But the tough questions arise when leaders have to actually spend international political capital confronting and challenging these issues. Put bluntly, sometimes you have to risk making people really mad at you. And anytime you're tough, anytime you threaten a withdrawal of funding or you boycott a summit, there may be a price to be paid in terms of international politics. But I know that people here and people that are watching appreciate and understand the importance of the stand that was taken in the context of that Commonwealth summit. Stephen Harper really had a focused approach. He didn't go into politics to make friends, I think. Rather, he went into politics with the goal of getting things done. And on the human rights front, that meant being willing to count a cost. And importantly, that doesn't mean that you don't engage with other countries. I think it's important to engage, but also to be willing to engage in a way that is tough, that is not perhaps the friendly, genteel stereotype that some people have about Canadians. From the basis of our pluralism, of our multiculturalism, we need to be willing to engage in a tough way that confronts the abusers of fundamental human rights. We need to engage in a way that's reflective of our interests and our values, not with the view to make and maintain friends at any cost. When it comes to human rights promotion around the world, I think we need to be tough, but also make the investments to build capacity. One of the signature achievements of the last government, I believe, was the creation of something called the Office of Religious Freedom, an office that was sensitive to the sources of interreligious tension, but whose impact was also very much in terms of trying to create programs and education that reduced intercommunity tensions. And it ran a very important program specifically in the context of Sri Lanka. I've heard in my meetings with the Canadian Tamil community about significant concerns about how, in fact, the education system in Sri Lanka does not encourage Sinhalese students to see the Tamil people in a positive light. This is gravely concerning because divisive education makes reconciliation very difficult, even if at some point in the future there is political will at the top for that genuine recognition. We've also heard concerns about whether or not Canadian aid programs are benefiting the whole country, or about whether or not they're concentrated simply in the south, as well as the ongoing military occupation of the north, and really the failure of living out the promises of reconciliation. Canada needs to be tough, and Canada needs to be present on the ground to monitor the situation, to support the most vulnerable, to promote reconciliation. We always need to be prepared to speak out. And when it comes to being tough, I think as a country we need to resist the regularization of the Sri Lankan military in the international community. That's very important. At the end of last year, we had a peacekeeping conference here in Canada in Vancouver, and in the process there was a granting of immunity from prosecution to those who participated. And we asked on what basis that immunity order was given and what crimes were envisioned that people would not have otherwise been able to participate in the conference on the basis of. Were the grounds involvement in genocide? Were they crimes against humanity? These questions went unanswered. And we had the participation of Sri Lanka in that conference under the immunity order, in spite of significant abuses, not only of Tamils in Sri Lanka, but abuses associated with peacekeeping operations that the Sri Lankan military had undertaken in other countries. I think people will be very familiar with, for instance, what happened in Haiti. These are issues that it is critical for us to be raising in a direct way and to be counting the cost, to be willing to take a strong stand for human rights on the international stage. Canada's tough engagement in the world on behalf of Canadian and universal human values is vitally needed. That tough engagement may have a cost, but for the sake of our brothers and sisters who are suffering, be they Tamil or Tibetan, Rohingya or Copt, Yazidi or Kurd, we must be there, and we will always be there. Thank you again for all the work everybody here is doing.
Thank you. We next have an NDP member, MP Murray Rankin, to give a few words.
Well, thank you very much.